Hey, this is Steve with Priority Bicycles, and today we're going to go over how to fix a flat on your Priority Classic Plus Gotham Edition. We always recommend having a professional do any repairs on your bicycle, but if you feel confident enough to do it at home, we always recommend having a professional check over your work to make sure that everything's safe and sound. Before we begin, you just need a few tools to do this job. A standard floor pump, a 15mm wrench, a 10mm wrench, a tire lever, a 5mm Allen key, and a dish rag. I always recommend undoing the rear brake before you flip the bike over. So all you need to do is grab both arms of your brake and pull this noodle completely out of the bracket to free up those brakes so you can get your wheel out. Then from there, we can flip the bike over. You always want to do it on a softer surface to make sure you don't mark anything up, but if you're on the street, just make sure you place it lightly so you don't rip your grips or your saddle. And once your bike's flipped over, you can start by undoing the shifting unit. So all you need to do that would be to grab your 5mm Allen key, insert it into the bolt behind the shifting unit itself, give it 1 or 2 turns counterclockwise so that it loosens up, and it should just pull right off. Then from there, you'll notice that there's a push rod inside the axle. You can just pull that completely out and put it to the side so that you don't lose it. And from there, we can grab our 15mm wrench and start to undo our axle bolts. Once it's loose, you can kind of just undo it with your hands. Same for the other side. They don't need to be completely taken off the axle itself. Then from there, we grab our 10mm wrench and start to undo the belt tensioners. And I like to take these completely off so you get the most amount of slack in the belt. Put those to the side so you don't lose them. Just give this a good tap so it goes to the front of the bike. Then you can take your belt off the front chainring and your wheel will just kind of drop out there. Take your belt off the rear cog and you're ready to start on your tire. So once you have your wheel free from the bike, remove this valve cap and grab your tire lever. I like to start on the complete opposite end of the valve, so that'll be where the least resistance is when taking the tire off. Put the tire lever under the lip of the tire. And move it all the way around so that it frees up one end of it. And once it's completely free of the rim, you can pull the tube completely out of the tire. Then pull the tire off the rim. Grab your dish rag and run it on the inside of the tire to make sure that there's nothing stuck in there to damage your new tube. Once you know that there's nothing in there, you can start by putting the tire right back onto the rim. Make sure that the tread pattern faces the front of the bike. And then start by seating the tire halfway all the way around. Grab your new tube, grab your floor pump and put a little bit of air into the tube itself to make sure that it takes a little bit of shape before you put it in there. And once it's round, you can start by inserting the valve in the valve hole on the rim. Once that's seated in there, feed the tube into the tire all the way around. Then from there, we can start pressing the tire into the rim itself around the tube. You can use your thumbs to kind of seat it all the way around. It'll start to get a little bit tougher towards the end, but you can just use your thumbs to sit it in there. Press it all the way around to the rim to make sure it's seated correctly. Then push this valve up, make sure it's not pinched around the valve. Then you're ready to start putting air back in your tire. To put air in there, you just take your valve hose, put it on the valve and lift the lever up, and that'll lock it down. Then you can start pumping. You want to go up to around 75, 80 PSI. Put the lever down and pull it straight off the valve. Then take the belt and put it around the cog on the wheel. From there, we can insert the axle back into the frame. You always want to have your chain tensioners on the inside of the frame. Once it's on there, you can loosely tighten these bolts down to make sure it kind of stays put. Make sure that this belt is seated all the way on the chainring up front and on the cog in the rear. Then you can start installing the plates for your belt tensioners. Now loosely do it with your hands just to keep everything solid. Then you can take your 10mm wrench to really tighten those guys down. So from there we can take our 10mm wrench to really tighten our belt tensioners down. And the ideal tension is going to be around 50 Hertz when you're using the Gates tension app. You can do a rough estimate by plucking the belt itself. And if you get a high pitch, it's usually a little too tight. If you get no sound at all, it's definitely too loose. What you're looking for is about a dull kind of thud until you can accurately measure it. Once those guys are tightened down, you can take your 15mm wrench and tighten down the axle bolts themselves. Once the axle bolts are tightened down, grab your push rod that you put it to the side earlier and insert it right back into the axle. Just give it a push. From there, we can take our shifting unit and place it right over the push rod and the axle bolt. Hold it with a thumb. Make sure that it's pretty flush with the frame. Take your 5mm Allen key and just tighten that locking bolt right back down. From there, we're ready to flip the bike back over. Once the bike's flipped back over, we can reattach the brake by squeezing both arms of the brake and pulling the noodle so that it sits right back in that bracket. Then it'll just snap in there. Give the lever a squeeze to make sure that it's centered. And you're ready to get back on the road.